Good morning, class. Welcome to Unit 10, Lesson 5. This is our last lesson prior to our exam, which will be at the end of this coming week, or end of this week, I guess. And we're going to read another article concerning capital punishment. This one is in direct response to Dr. Colson's article that we read last week. So Dr. Colson's article was entitled "Why I Support Capital Punishment." This article is by Dr. Matthew Arbo, who writes "Why I Oppose Capital Punishment." Both were published by the Gospel Coalition in February of 2017. And they're published in response to the sentencing of Dylan Roof, who murdered 9 African American churchgoers in Charleston, South Carolina, a number of years ago. He was sentenced to death. We're going to fill out the exact same worksheet we filled out for Dr. Colson's article. We want to sort of compare them side by side using the same criteria, and we want to think about issues of justice and issues of, like, well, what does the Bible say? So we're going to try to consider both arguments, sort of side by side, and at the end of the day, figure out where we stand. So, like we did last time, here in part A of this video, I'm going to just read through the article with you. Hopefully it's helpful. If you don't find it helpful, you can skip it and just read it yourself. But do attend to the argument, right? And take some time to fill out the worksheet yourself. And then in part B of this video, we'll walk through the answers to the worksheet together. And you can see if I missed anything, or if you disagree with my assessment of the argument. So let's jump right in. Dr. Arbo starts. Dylan Roof, the white supremacist who murdered 9 African Americans attending a church Bible study, was sentenced to death in federal court earlier this month. It was expected. Roof's crime was a monstrous evil. You'll find few who feel he's undeserving of the sentence. To be honest, I resonate with that sentiment too. And yet, when I peer deeper into my anger toward him, I have to admit, executing him doesn't really set things to rights. It only feels it might. Therein lies the crux of the problem. On the Christian account, the justice in capital punishment doesn't consist of feelings of satisfaction achieved through retaliation or vengeance, but in setting to right what really can be set to right. Christians are not obligated to support capital punishment, and indeed should not support it. My reasons for opposing the death penalty are both philosophical and theological. Let me begin with the philosophical objections, which I divide into theoretical and practical aspects, and then conclude with the theological objections. First, philosophical objections. Says this: advocates of capital punishment will often appeal to the importance of perpetrators receiving what they deserve, or paying back the wrongdoer for his crime. This exchange is believed to follow the old legal principle of lex talionis, eye for an eye, and thus, in a sense, settles up a criminal's debt incurred by the wrongdoing. But thinking of punishment as an exchange, tit for tat, is a mistake. Punishment is better conceived as a symbolic representation. If one person murders another, killing the wrongdoer does not reestablish the state of affairs that existed before before the murder took place. That moment is irrecoverable. Punishment can't finally and of itself restore just equilibrium to society. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition for social ordering. The death penalty, as one form of punishment, can only represent the violent crimes. As in Roof's case, it punishes symbolically, bringing the accused to trial, and in turn notifying the public of what's happened and what's being done to correct it. Capital punishment isn't so much reestablishing justice as respecting it. It's not some past state of affairs that's most desired anyway, but rather the deep-seated feeling that wrongdoers should receive retribution. For the retributivist, the purpose of punishment is simply to punish. That's literally what the word retribution means. And in many respects, retribution has a rightful place in our penal code or our law code, our laws about punishment. When applied to capital punishment, however, the theory begins to break down. Retribution can at best form only part of punishment's purpose. It's equally essential that punishment tell the truth about the crime and with pedagogical purpose. That's Augustine's position. He argues that punishment should both tell the truth about a crime and also discipline the accused in formative, proportionate ways. The death penalty is unique among punishments in that uh, it is incapable of exactly this pedagogical purpose. The dead do not learn from their mistakes or from the discipline imposed. Suggesting that capital punishment somehow expresses our sincere respect for human life, that is, the image of God, is, on its face, far too paradoxical to accept. For this reason, and the reasons offered below, I do not believe that Genesis 9:6, which refers to the shedding of blood for shed blood, is morally applicable. The fact of um, our being co-executioners of Christ is ample enough reason to adjust our hermeneutic, our application or interpretation of Genesis 9:6 on this point. Evidence also suggests that capital punishment does not serve as an effective deterrent to capital offenses. Some capital cases are charged as unpremeditated or in the heat of passion, and so never entered the wrongdoer's mind before perpetration. Moreover, in the 14 states without the death penalty, homicide rates are at or below the national average. Positive evidence of the death penalty's effectiveness at dissuading violent crime is uncompelling. Practical objections. Let me now shift briefly to the practical aspects, beginning with a couple of suggestive statistics. More than half of death row inmates are people of color. Since 1977, the overwhelming majority of death row inmates, 77%, have been accused of killing white victims, even though African Americans make up half of all homicide victims. Since 1973, 140 individuals on death row have been exonerated. Almost all death row inmates could not afford their own trial attorney. Since 1976, 82% of all exonerations have taken place in the South. Of the 344 exonerees represented by the Innocence Project, 20 served time on death row. Of the 344 exonerees, 71% involved eyewitness misidentification, 46% involved misapplication of forensic evidence, 42% involved false or coerced confessions. Of the 344, a full two-thirds were people of color. This is but a small sample of the practical problems endemic to the criminal justice system. I wish to highlight in particular the problems of attorney representation and racial bias. Given the current strain placed on public defenders, both because of caseload and prolonged underfunding, it is difficult to see how violent offenders who can't afford their own counsel are comparably represented by state-appointed counsel, no matter how well-meaning or talented that counsel might be. Likewise, mounting evidence suggests that people of color receive a disproportionate percentage of capital sentences. Together, they are reason enough to place a temporary national stay on capital punishment. Let's pause for a second. Look back at Dr. Colson's argument. Um, does he disagree with Dr. Arbo on this point? Is Dr. Arbo actually like disagreeing with Dr. Colson on this point? Consider it. Also consider um, this is a very, very different argument than saying that capital punishment is in violation of the Bible or is in or that capital punishment is immoral. Um, he says, together these statistics are reason enough to place a temporary national stay on capital punishment. Notice that argument. What is that argument about? What's he advocating there? Okay. I think it's going to be slightly different. I think that's a slightly different argument than the argument that he's going to make in the next section. Just bear in mind, okay? What problem is he pointing out here? Is the problem here actually capital punishment, or is it something else? Okay, back to the article. Finally, his theological objections. Finally, let's consider theological objections to the death penalty. First, if one wishes to justify capital punishment on the Old Testament's lex talionis, eye for an eye principle, then one must demonstrate how the death penalty as a punitive measure is morally right, since the civil and ceremonial elements of the law have been fulfilled in Christ. In doing so, Christian advocates of capital punishment will also have to reckon with Jesus' instruction in Matthew 5:38 through 41, where he makes clear his retaliatory interpretation. This retaliatory interpretation of the law was incorrect. Pause. Take note. We did discuss this passage when we were discussing the Ten Commandments. Or maybe we didn't. Oh, I think we discussed it. Take a look. Take a look back in your notes. Okay. Um, if one is subject, if one is subject to wrongdoing or injustice, Jesus implores forbearance, charity, dismissing any reading that justifies vengeance. It is especially difficult in practice to disentangle vengeance from retribution in capital punishment. Governing authorities are sometimes required to use force to uphold the law and secure peace, of course, but nothing constrains them to kill offenders in order to do so. The same idea is presumed in the logic of Romans 13. The death penalty, the political authority may, but is not required to, impose a penalty of death. Neither is the Christian insubordinate or disrespectful in pleading for measured clemency. Okay. A second theological point offered long ago by Augustine is this one. Is this. Once the condemned is put to death, the person is no longer eligible for evangelization and conversion. Clemency better allows for the possibility of rebirth in Christ. It doesn't guarantee conversion, obviously, but execution certainly shortens the chances. I sense the early church took this particular opportunity to heart. Third, the Christian faith is fully and entirely pro-life, beginning to end. This commitment is broad enough, has broad enough scope, even for the condemned. Human beings, human beings, every human being has dignity, and no one, not even the monstrous, can lose his or her dignity altogether. I find Oliver O'Donovan instructive on precisely this point. If Christianity takes human dignity seriously, we should criticize any penalty that fosters attitude of contempt towards the condemned. The Deuteronomic Code, for example, limits the number of times the guilty can be flogged, lest your brother be degraded in your sight. Degradation is here distinguishable from shame, which may rightly attend punishment. But execution is degradation by definition. As O'Donovan puts it, when the suffering of punishment becomes an object of vulgar curiosity and fascination, even experiment, the condemned person ceases to count among us as a human being, deserving of neighbor love, and ordinary human respect seems to vanish. Those are my objections and explanations. I put them frankly, knowing many will vehemently reject my arguments. I understand the feeling. I ask only that you consider whether capital punishment actually gives the condemned what they deserve, or whether it simply assuages the anger, however justifiable, of those with relation to the slain, who then equate justice is served with the one who killed my loved one has been killed. Many so-called Christian defenses of capital punishment are, I fear, more utilitarian than theological. So that concludes Dr. Matthew Arbo's um, article. Um, an interesting one, no doubt. Um, Now, your task is to go ahead and fill out the worksheet um, in with respect to his argument. How does his argument stand up? How does it compare to Dr. Colson's argument? In what sense? And then, like, where do we stand? Where do you stand? Do you think Dr. Colson is right? Do you think Dr. Arbo is right? Um, uh, is there somehow some sort of middle ground here that we've missed? Um, Take some time to think about it, and then check back in for part B of this discussion to work through the worksheet together. Love you guys. God bless you. Have a great day.